I mean, is that a smart idea? I feel like that would, like, because, like nobody takes, like, any sort of latency in, like, competitive gaming, like, immediately ruins any competitiveness that, it has, right? Because it's like, well, you're literally just, although this takes me back to, like, Doom, like, the original Doom on game dial-up, right? Like, think about that for a second. Isn't that shit crazy? Where they were, like, literally, like, predicting. And it's like, how the fuck can a computer predict? But then it's, like, not even predicting, it's actually just, um, uh, there's, like, a series of options, right, that can happen, and it essentially picks one, and then, like, if it's wrong, like, that's where you get the lag, right? Or something like that. I don't know. I was thinking about that and how that could, like, apply to, like, AI sending messages to and from the future, right? Because a wormhole can take place in, we're going quantum mechanics here, guys. Very small. Like, wormholes can exist between atoms. Get that for a second, right? So that means that a wormhole can exist, smaller than what we can perceive, right? And if, the major bottleneck would be our electricity in our brain can only reach, it's like, it's not that fast. It's not faster than the speed of light. It's, how fast does electricity move in our brain?
Electrical signals in the brain travel at different speeds depending on the type of nerve fiber. In some highly insulated fibers, these signals can zip along at up to 120 meters per second, which is roughly 268 miles per hour. However, in other fibers that are not insulated, the speed can be much slower, sometimes less than 1 meter per second. It's fascinating to think about how this compares to electricity in a wire, which moves nearly at the speed of light. Does that give you a good picture of how the brain communicates?
How come it moves so much slower in our brain than it does in a standard copper wire?
The difference comes down to what's actually moving. In a copper wire, you have electrons flowing, which are incredibly light and driven by an electromagnetic field that travels almost instantly. In the brain, the electricity is actually a wave of charged ions like sodium and potassium moving in and out of the nerve cells. Creating and propagating those signals requires chemical changes and opening biological gates, which takes much longer than the flow of electrons. Does that distinction between electron flow and ion movement make sense?
So it's less about electrons flowing and more about ions flowing. What's the difference between an electron and an ion?
An electron is a fundamental subatomic particle with a negative charge and almost no mass on its own. An ion, on the other hand, is an entire atom or molecule that has gained or lost one or more electrons, which gives it a net positive or negative charge. So while electrons are tiny individual particles, ions are bigger chemical building blocks that carry a charge. Does that distinction help you visualize the different players in this biological process?
Yeah, what's the first reference to an ion? Like, who was the first one to discover it?
The term ion was introduced by the physicist Michael Faraday in the 1830s. He needed a word to describe the chemical species that move toward electrodes when an electric current passes through a solution. Later in the 1880s, the chemist Svante Arrhenius proposed the theory that these ions are actually present in solutions even before any electricity is applied, which earned him a Nobel Prize. Isn't it interesting how that concept evolved over time?
The term ion was introduced by the physicist Michael Faraday in the 1830s. He needed a word to describe the chemical species that move toward electrodes when an electric current passes through a solution. Later, in the 1880s, the chemist, different from a physicist, Savant Arrhenius proposed the theory that these ions are actually present in solutions even before any electricity is applied.
That's exactly right. You've captured the main points perfectly. Michael Faraday coined the term to describe those moving charged particles, and Svante Arrhenius expanded that understanding to explain that they exist naturally in solutions. Is there another part of this history or science you'd like to dive into?
Yeah, can you give me like like a complete like breakdown, detailed synopsis of like how an ion functions, where they started, where they're going, and why they do it.
Let's take a comprehensive look at the journey and function of ions. It all starts with atoms, which are naturally neutral because they have an equal number of positive protons and negative electrons. When an atom gains or loses electrons, it becomes an ion, carrying a net positive or negative charge. They function based on these charges, creating electrical fields and moving toward areas of opposite charge to achieve balance. They move across cell membranes or through solutions to transmit signals, like the nerve impulses in your brain, because that movement allows the system to minimize energy and maintain stability. Does that full circle explanation help bring it all together?
When an atom gains or loses electrons, it becomes an ion carrying a net positive or negative charge. They function based on these charges, creating electrical fields and moving towards areas of opposite charge to achieve balance. They move across cell membranes or through solutions to transmit signals. Kind of. What is their like chemical formula?
Ions don't have a single universal chemical formula because they're simply individual charged particles or atoms that have gained or lost electrons. Instead, their formula depends on the specific element or molecule they're part of. For instance, a sodium ion is written as Na+, while a chloride ion is written as Cl-. Does that make sense, or would you like to see another example?
Where does the polarity come from?
The polarity of an ion comes directly from an imbalance between the number of positive protons in the nucleus and the number of electrons surrounding it. Normally, an atom has an equal number of both, resulting in a neutral charge. If the atom gains extra electrons, it develops a negative charge because the total negative charge outweighs the positive. Conversely, if it loses electrons, the positive protons dominate, giving it a positive charge. Does that explanation of the charge imbalance make sense?
Yes, are all elements like that, or aren't most elements polarized?
Not all elements are naturally polarized. In their standard uncombined state, most elements are neutral because they contain an equal number of protons and electrons. However, almost all elements can become polarized under the right conditions, like when they bond with other elements to form ions, where some become positively or negatively charged. Certain elements, like the noble gases, are exceptionally stable and rarely form charged particles or ions at all.
What are the most common ion elements?
Some of the most common elements that form ions, especially in biological and physiological contexts, include sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, and chloride. These ions play crucial roles in everything from nerve signal transmission, which we discussed earlier, to muscle contractions and maintaining the balance of fluids in your body. Do you want to know more about the specific function of any of these particular ions?
Sodium, potassium. Is potassium an element?
Yes, potassium is definitely an element. It's a soft, silvery white metal that's extremely reactive, which is why you never find it in its pure form in nature, but rather as compounds or ions like we were just discussing. It's also vital for many biological processes, especially for how your muscles work and keeping your heart beating properly.
In executive dysfunction, what is the polarization happening?
Executive dysfunction doesn't involve the type of ionic polarization we talked about earlier. Rather, it's a disruption in the complex communication networks within the brain, particularly between the prefrontal cortex and other areas. This can lead to difficulties with planning, organizing, focusing, and regulating emotions. Think of it like a traffic jam in a control center, where the messages aren't reaching the right destination smoothly. Does that help clarify how executive dysfunction affects brain processing?
Yes, but I'm more concerned with how, with why the signal is not being sent from the neuron, because its state of polarization is what?
When a neuron is not sending a signal, it is typically due to its resting state or because it is in a state of hyperpolarization. In its resting state, the inside of the neuron is more negative compared to the outside, and the membrane potential is maintained by the sodium-potassium pump. If this potential becomes even more negative, known as hyperpolarization, it makes it much harder for the neuron to reach the threshold required to fire an action potential. This information is not medical advice or diagnosis. If you have concerns about neurological function, please see a healthcare professional or seek care.
See, when a neuron, okay, let's see. When a neuron is not sending a signal, it is typically due to its resting state, or it's because in a state of hyperpolar. If it's in a resting state, it's not a big deal. It's because the shit is being hyperpolarized, which is weird. The inside of the neuron is more negative compared to the outside, and the membrane potential is maintained by the sodium-potassium pump. If this potential becomes even more negative, known as hyperpolarization, it makes it much harder for the neuron to reach the threshold required to fire an action potential. How would I, depolarize a hyperpolarized ion?
To depolarize a hyperpolarized neuron, you would typically need to introduce positive ions into the cell, such as sodium or calcium. In the brain, this often happens when excitatory neurotransmitters open channels that allow these positive ions to flow inward, making the inside less negative and bringing it closer to the threshold for firing. This process is a fundamental part of how neurons communicate.
What role does chloride play in polarization in neurons?
Chloride ions play a significant role in the polarization of neurons, primarily by helping to maintain or increase the negative charge inside the cell. Since chloride ions are negatively charged, when chloride channels open and they flow into the neuron, they make the interior even more negative. This process is called hyperpolarization, and it makes the neuron less likely to fire an action potential, providing a crucial way to inhibit neural activity.
So it could be like self-control, right?
Yes, that's a great analogy. You can think of those inhibitory processes involving chloride as a biological brake system for the brain. Just like self-control helps you hit the brakes on impulsive actions, those inhibitory signals help prevent neurons from firing inappropriately. It's all about maintaining balance and order, both in your nervous system and in your everyday life. Is there anything else you'd like to connect this to?
Yes, are sodium ions like the gas then?
Not quite. Sodium is actually a very reactive metal in its pure form, not a gas. When it becomes a sodium ion, it's lost an electron and carries a positive charge. Noble gases, on the other hand, are a completely different group of elements that are incredibly stable and very rarely form any charged particles or ions at all.
No. I was asking if because you compared chloride to a brake, would sodium be like a gas pedal?
I understand now. Yes, that's a fantastic way to think about it. Sodium ions have a positive charge, and when they flow into the neuron, they make the inside less negative, which is called depolarization. This process is what triggers a nerve impulse, so comparing it to a gas pedal that accelerates or promotes neural firing is absolutely correct.
What about potassium? Is potassium a gas or brake pedal?
Potassium ions actually function more like a brake pedal as well. When potassium channels open and positive potassium ions flow out of the cell, it brings the membrane potential back down, which is called repolarization, and sometimes even hyperpolarization. So it helps to stop the signal and reset the neuron to get it ready for the next one.
So we reset. And how about calcium? What does calcium do?
Calcium ions act as a crucial signal in the brain, particularly at the very end of the neuron. When an electrical impulse reaches the end of a neuron, it opens calcium channels, allowing calcium to rush in. This influx of calcium causes tiny sacs containing neurotransmitters to fuse with the cell membrane and release their chemical messages into the space between neurons. So, calcium acts as a trigger for communication between nerve cells.
And what does magnesium do?
Magnesium plays a really